Thank you all so much for coming. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Hanish. I am from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I attended the greatest university in the world.
Fight on! Fight on!
I am here today to talk to you about why you think you're inadequate and why you definitely aren't. Now, needless to say, I could not give this talk to just anyone. Namely, I could not give this talk to people who are actually inadequate. But luckily, you all are part of the premier early career development experience in media, so I know this talk applies to you. In fact, I am so confident that you all are so high achieving that it was very strange to me to notice a thread of self-doubt in the group. How could people who are so qualified feel in any way underqualified? I was actually used to feeling this way myself, but it was a very new experience for me to see other people question their own accomplishments. But it turns out that this is actually the perfect example of the imposter syndrome, a feeling of phoniness and unworthiness when it comes to the accomplishments of high-achieving people. Even though people who experience imposter syndrome are highly motivated, they don't believe any of the credit that comes their way because their judgment is clouded by the effects of imposter syndrome: anxiety, perfectionism, fear of failure, and self-doubt. In fact, over 70% of people in the United States have felt some form of these symptoms of the imposter syndrome. And to me, that seems low. If you all really haven't experienced any of these effects of imposter syndrome, I am so happy for you, and I really hope that you tune in to my next page talk on the value of humility. So, to explore a little bit more about imposter syndrome, it actually helps to examine the exact opposite of imposter syndrome, the Dunning-Krugar effect. Why incompetent people think they're amazing. Just kidding. The Dunning-Krugar effect examines why it is so difficult to evaluate ourselves. For example, people who lack skill in a particular area, people who are truly inadequate, suffer somewhat of a double curse. They make mistakes and they fail to recognize those mistakes because they lack the very expertise necessary to understand just how badly they are doing. On the other hand, people with a moderate amount of ability or a moderate amount of skill can recognize their own flaws, but that's all they can see. Because they know what they don't know, they actually have less confidence than people who are less qualified than they are. And finally, people who are experts in their field, people who are incredibly skilled and talented and beautiful, have a different problem. Their problem is that they think that everyone around them is just as qualified as they are. So, according to the Dunning-Krugar effect, everyone is trapped in this bubble of inaccurate self-perception. People who are unskilled can't see their own faults. People who are moderately skilled see mostly or only their faults, and people who are exceptionally competent don't perceive how unusual their abilities truly are. And it's actually this last phenomenon that can lead directly to imposter syndrome. When people are incredibly high achieving, they tend to think that other people are just as qualified. And so that can spiral into feelings that they don't deserve the praise or the admiration or the opportunities that they're given above other people. And unfortunately, there's no level of accomplishment that puts these feelings to rest. In fact, Albert Einstein called himself an involuntary swindler, whose work didn't deserve as much credit as it had received. And even after writing 11 books and winning multiple prestigious awards, Maya Angelou felt like she had run a game on everybody, and they were going to find her out. And these feelings aren't limited to incredibly successful people either, because everyone is susceptible to a phenomenon called pluralistic ignorance. Why everyone doubts themselves privately but believes they're alone in that way of thinking because no one else voices their doubts. So, because it can be difficult to know how hard our peers work, how difficult they find certain tasks, or how much time they spend reading the trades, it can be difficult to dismiss feelings that we are less capable than those around us. So, because we're not great at analyzing ourselves, we start to doubt our own abilities or think that everyone else is just as qualified as we are, and there's no easy way to dismiss those feelings because it's hard to understand how everyone else works. So if this is the case, how do we combat imposter syndrome? How do we end the cycle? How do we, dare I say, break the wheel? It's a game of poker. Well, it's actually a very simple 3-step process. One of the best ways that you can combat imposter syndrome is to talk about it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean asking for feedback right away, because negative feedback just confirms our fears, and positive feedback does nothing to erase those feelings of fraudulence. But talking to someone about imposter syndrome is one of the best ways to negate its effects. Even finding out that there is a term for these shared feelings can be an incredible sense of relief. Once you've acknowledged that you feel this way, then you can combat imposter syndrome by collecting and revisiting positive feedback. Ask for feedback, even when it's hard to hear. Believe it, and revisit what you're doing well. Don't let yourself talk badly about yourself, and don't be ashamed of your past mistakes. Take a deep breath, feel compassion, and revisit what you're doing well. When you revisit the positive feedback you've received, it can give you the courage and the confidence to address the negative. And when you're ready to address the negative feedback head on, remember to always keep learning. Learning a new skill, learning to overcome obstacles, or learning to improve on your mistakes are some of the best ways to combat imposter syndrome. So, even though we may never be able to dismiss these feelings entirely, if we continue to talk about them, to ask for feedback, even when it's hard to hear, and to always keep learning, we may be able to build confidence in a few simple truths. You are talented, you are capable, and you absolutely deserve to be here. Thank you so much.